Morning I found out I was standing at my kitchen sink watching the neighbor's dog dig up my tulip bulbs again. That's the thing about real life. The moments that change everything don't announce themselves. They arrive while you're distracted by something small and ordinary, and by the time you realize what's happened, the ground has already shifted beneath your feet. My name is Evelyn. I'm 68 years old. I live alone in a 3-bedroom house in Naperville, Illinois, a house I've owned outright since 2019, a house I repainted myself the summer after my husband Walter passed, because I needed to do something with my hands or I was going to come apart at the seams. I chose a soft cream color for the shutters. Walter always wanted gray. I figured that was my one small act of defiance, and I took it. I worked for 31 years as a paralegal for a mid-sized firm in the Loop. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't the kind of woman who wore red lipstick to depositions or talked loudly at the office Christmas party. I was the one who remembered everybody's filing deadlines, who brought soup when the receptionist got sick, who stayed late without being asked. When I retired, they gave me a card signed by 42 people and a gift card to a garden center. I cried in my car for 20 minutes. Walter and I had 2 children. Our son, Kevin, lives in Phoenix. He calls on birthdays and usually on Mother's Day, and that's enough for both of us. We've always been fine at a distance, Kevin and me. He got Walter's practical streak and my stubbornness in equal measure, and it makes him a good engineer and a difficult person to have a long conversation with. But he's decent. That matters. Then there's my daughter, Sylvia. Sylvia is 41. She's beautiful in that specific way that people notice immediately in a room. Dark hair, her father's green eyes, a laugh that makes strangers turn their heads. She married her husband Todd when she was 28 and I paid for the wedding, $42,000 at a vineyard in the Hudson Valley, because Sylvia had been dreaming of that venue since she was 16, and Todd came from a family that called themselves comfortable and the way people do when they mean they won't be helping with the bill. I didn't mind. I want to be honest about that. I didn't pay for that wedding with resentment. I paid for it with love. The same way I paid for her college at DePaul. The same way I'd co-signed the loan on their first car. The same way I'd quietly sent her $800 one February when she texted me that they were a little short on their mortgage payment. I didn't tell Walter about that one. He would have said something sharp and been right about it, and I wasn't ready to hear it. That $800 in February became a pattern. I understand that now. After Walter died, I inherited his life insurance, $340,000, and the savings we'd built together over 40 years of 2 incomes and modest vacations and buying store-brand cereal without complaining about it. I wasn't wealthy by any measure that would impress anyone at a cocktail party, but I was comfortable and I had worked for every cent of it. Sylvia knew. Of course she knew. We'd been close, or what I believed was close. She called more often after Walter died. She'd come by on Sundays sometimes with my grandchildren, Cooper and Lily, and we'd make pancakes and watch old movies on the couch, and those afternoons were the best parts of my week. I didn't notice, or maybe I didn't want to notice, that the Sundays became less frequent as the favors became more frequent. It started small. Todd's truck needed new tires, and could I help just this once? Cooper needed braces, and their dental insurance had a gap. Lily's school was doing a special trip to Washington, and they didn't want her to miss out. Could I? Would I? Just this once? I always said yes. I said yes because I loved them. I said yes because I believed the myth I'd built about myself, that I was the kind of mother who showed up, who provided, who never made her children feel the weight of her limits. I said yes because it felt like love. And I didn't yet understand that there is a version of saying yes that teaches people your boundaries don't exist. By the time I was 66, I had 17 recurring transfers set up through my bank account. 17. Their mortgage gap payment, their car insurance, Cooper's tutoring sessions twice a week with a woman named Mrs. Ferraro who charged $80 an hour, a streaming bundle that somehow got added to my card and never came off. Todd's gym membership, which I didn't even know about until I saw the charge from a place called Iron and Grace with a logo that looked like it cost more than the membership. I had a color-coded spreadsheet because I am a paralegal by training and that's what I do. And when I finally sat down and added it all up, I was sending Sylvia's household $3,200 a month, $30,200 every single month. My Social Security check is $2,100. Every single month, my Social Security check is $2,100. I want you to sit with that for a moment. I was spending more on my daughter's life than my entire monthly income. The rest came from Walter's savings. The savings we scraped together for 38 years. The savings that were supposed to carry me through my 70s and 80s, through whatever came, through the possibility that I would get sick or need help, or just need the dignity of being able to pay my own bills. I didn't see it clearly until a Thursday evening in October. Sylvia had invited me to Cooper's 13th birthday dinner. Or I thought she had. I'd written it in my planner with a little star, the way I've always marked things I'm looking forward to. I bought Cooper a book about architecture, because he'd mentioned once that he liked the way downtown Chicago looked from the river, and I'd held on to that detail the way grandmothers do. I wrapped it myself. Green paper, because it was his favorite color when he was 7, and I didn't know if it still was, but I hoped. I drove 40 minutes in Thursday traffic. I knocked on the door. Todd answered. He looked at me the way you look at someone when you've forgotten they were coming and you're not entirely pleased to be reminded. Just for a second. He recovered fast, but I saw it. After 31 years reading people across conference tables, I see things in a second that some people miss in an hour. Mom. He always called me Mom. I used to like that. We thought, Sylvia mentioned we might keep it small this year. Just the 4 of us. Just the 4 of them. I was standing on the porch of the house I helped keep out of foreclosure 18 months ago. The porch with the rocking chairs, I bought them as a housewarming gift. The rocking chairs Sylvia had sent me a photo of, saying they made the whole front of the house. And I was being told, gently but unmistakably, that there wasn't room for me at my grandson's birthday dinner. I said I understood. I handed Todd the green package and I walked back to my car. I didn't cry until I got to the end of their street, and then I cried so hard I had to pull over. I sat there for a long time. Long enough for the streetlights to come on, long enough for a teenager to walk past walking a golden retriever and glance at me with that particular teenage mixture of concern and deep discomfort. Long enough for something to shift inside me. Something slow and tectonic, something that didn't make a sound but that I felt in my chest like a door closing. When had my generosity become invisible? When did I stop being a person to them and start being a resource? When had I last been asked how I was doing? Not as a preamble to a favor, but just because. I drove home. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and my color-coded spreadsheet, and I looked at 17 recurring transfers, and I thought about the morning Walter died. He'd been sick for 8 months. At the end, he was very quiet, and one afternoon about a week before, he held my hand and said, "Evelyn, don't let people take from you what I worked so hard to give you." I told him to hush. I told him to rest. I didn't want to hear it because I thought he was talking about strangers, about scammers and con artists, about the world out there. He was talking about Sylvia. He knew. Of course he knew. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the table until about 2 in the morning, and then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my bank and I asked them to pull the last 24 months of transfers. And then I made a second column in my spreadsheet. Not what I was paying, but what Sylvia and Todd's household income actually was. She'd mentioned it casually enough over the years. Todd made $91,000 at his logistics company. Sylvia had gone back to work part-time at a dental office, 3 days a week, probably $28,000 a year, if I was being generous. That's $119,000 combined household income. For a family of 4 in the suburbs of New Jersey, that's not wealthy, but it is manageable. It is absolutely manageable without a 68-year-old widow sending them $3,200 a month from her dead husband's savings. I looked at that number for a very long time. Then I opened my bank's app and I started going through the transfers one by one. Cooper's tutoring. I thought about the fact that Cooper was now 13, no longer struggling in the same subjects. According to the 2 times Sylvia had mentioned school in passing. Still paying Mrs. Ferraro $80 twice a week. Todd's gym membership. Iron and Grace. $89 a month. The man had told me twice in the last year that they were stretched thin. The streaming bundle. 4 services. I had one TV and I was paying for 4 streaming services I had never once logged into. By 3 a.m., I had a list. By 4 a.m., I had made my decision. I didn't do it out of anger. I want to be clear about that because I think sometimes people hear a story like this and they imagine a woman slamming a laptop shut, fuming, wanting revenge. That's not what it was. It was calmer than that and colder and sadder. It was the feeling of setting down something very heavy that you've been carrying so long you forgot you were carrying it. I called my bank when they opened at 8. I canceled every recurring transfer. All 17. The woman on the phone had a kind voice and she didn't ask any questions, and I was grateful for that, because I don't know that I could have explained it to a stranger without my voice breaking. Then I called my estate planning attorney, a woman I'd worked with years ago whose card I'd kept in my files. We had a brief conversation. I had an appointment the following Tuesday. I didn't call Sylvia, she called me. That Friday, 4 days later, I was gardening, trying to save what was left of my tulip bulbs. "Mom, there's something wrong with the bank transfers." "No," I said, "there isn't." A pause. "What do you mean?" "I canceled them. All of them." The silence on the phone was a particular kind of silence. Not the silence of someone who doesn't understand. The silence of someone who understands completely and is calculating. "Mom, you can't. We count on those. Todd's truck payment is due on the 15th. Cooper's tutoring. You and Todd earn $119,000 a year," I said. "Together. Before taxes, yes, but still. You can make the truck payment." Another silence. Then her voice shifted. Not to hurt, to something colder. "I don't know where you're getting those numbers, but we are not in a position where we can just absorb, Sylvia." I kept my voice steady. That's the thing about 31 years of depositions. You learn to keep your voice steady. I am 68 years old. I have a fixed income. Your father's savings were not meant to fund your household indefinitely. I should have said this years ago, and I am sorry that I didn't, because it wasn't fair to either of us. She said I was being cruel. She said I could have warned them. She said a lot of things, and some of them were things that would have broken me a year ago, would have sent me scrambling to undo everything I'd done and apologize for apologizing. But I'd sat at that kitchen table until 4 in the morning, and I'd already grieved what I needed to grieve. "I love you," I told her. "I will always love you. But I will not spend my savings supporting a lifestyle you can afford to support yourself. When you want to talk, I'm here." I hung up. My hands were shaking. I sat down on the back porch step and watched the robins in the yard for a while. And I let myself feel all of it, the grief, the guilt, the relief, and then I went back to trying to save my tulips. Todd called twice that weekend. I didn't pick up. He sent one text that I read and did not respond to. It said they'd been counting on my support and that it wasn't right to pull it without notice. I thought about responding. I thought about sending him the 2-year history of transfers, the sum total, the number with all the zeros. I decided that was a conversation for a day when I was steadier. What I didn't expect was Lily. My granddaughter is 15. She is quiet where Cooper is loud, watchful where he charges ahead. She had her mother's dark hair and her grandfather's habit of tilting her head when she was thinking. I hadn't seen her since August, which I hadn't let myself dwell on too much. She texted me on Sunday morning, 2 weeks after the phone call. It just said, "Grandma, can I come over? I'll take the bus." She arrived at noon with a backpack and a box of those grocery store shortbread cookies I'd mentioned once that I liked. She sat at my kitchen table and she didn't pretend she didn't know what was happening. She said, "Mom's upset, but I've been thinking about it, and I think you did the right thing." 15 years old. Sitting at my kitchen table with a box of shortbread cookies, telling me I did the right thing. We talked for 3 hours. She told me things I hadn't known. That Cooper had stopped needing the twice-weekly tutoring almost a year ago. That Todd had gotten a bonus last spring. That Sylvia had redone their guest bathroom in March. Small things, maybe, but they settled into the place in my chest where the doubt was living, and they helped. I told Lily about her grandfather. About the morning he asked me not to let people take from me what he'd worked to give me. She'd been 9 when he died, and she didn't remember the details of his voice, but she remembered the way he smelled like cedar and that he always had a peppermint in his pocket. "He sounds like he knew you really well," she said. "He did," I said. "Better than I knew myself." I met with my attorney on Tuesday as scheduled. We updated my will. I established a trust for both grandchildren, structured so that the funds would be accessible to them directly when each turns 25. For education or a first home, managed by a trustee, with no access granted to Sylvia or Todd at any point. That part was important to me. My grandchildren didn't choose the dynamic their parents created. They shouldn't be punished for it. But I would not put another dollar where it could be redirected without my knowledge. My attorney, who is a measured and professional woman who has seen everything, looked up from her notes and said quietly, "This is a very sound decision, Evelyn." That meant more to me than I expected it to. Sylvia and I have not had a real conversation since October. She sends brief, polite texts on holidays. I respond warmly. I don't know what the future looks like for us. I can't know that yet. I hope for something. I hope that at some point she stops being angry and starts being honest, with herself most of all, about what the arrangement we had was doing to both of us. I hope she finds her footing, because I actually believe they can do it. I believe that more than she does, right now, but I can't carry her belief in herself for her. I tried that. I spent 6 years and more of Walter's savings than I want to total up trying that, and all it did was make it easier for her not to have to. Lily comes over on Sundays now. Sometimes she brings a friend. We make pancakes, the way we used to when she was small, and we watch old movies, and she tells me things about school that I don't entirely understand, but listen to carefully because she is trusting me with them. Last Sunday, she helped me plant the tulip bulbs I'd finally managed to save. We dug the holes with trowels, spaced them out the way the instructions said, talked about nothing in particular. At some point, she looked up and said, "Grandma, do you feel better? Like, overall?" I thought about it honestly. "I feel like myself," I said. "Maybe for the first time in a while." She nodded like that made perfect sense. Then she patted the soil back over the last bulb, brushed off her hands and said, "Good, you should." I think about what Walter said to me in those quiet last days. I think about the version of myself who kept saying yes because I believed that was what love looked like. I think about the woman who sat in her car on a dark residential street because her daughter's husband looked at her like she was an inconvenience on her own grandson's birthday. I am not that woman anymore. I am the woman sitting on her back porch in the early evening with a cup of chamomile tea, listening to the robins, looking at a yard that is entirely, completely her own. I am the woman who finally understood the difference between generosity and erasure. I am the woman who chose herself, not out of selfishness, but out of the quiet, overdue conviction that I had earned the right to still be here. Walter would have nodded. He would have said something dry and precise, and he would have been right, and I would have rolled my eyes and we would have laughed. I whisper into the quiet yard sometimes in the evenings. I think he hears me. I've thought a lot about what I would tell a younger version of myself, not the 25-year-old version. She wouldn't listen anyway. I mean the 62-year-old version, the one who had just lost Walter and was so desperate to still be needed that she couldn't see what that desperation was costing her. I would tell her this. The way you treat yourself teaches people how to treat you, not in a harsh way, not as a judgment, just as a fact, the way gravity is a fact. When I kept saying yes to the truck tires, to the gym membership I didn't know about, to the streaming services I never used, I was telling Sylvia and Todd over and over that my limits were negotiable, that my comfort mattered less than their convenience. They didn't invent that lesson. I taught it to them. One automatic transfer at a time across 6 years of quiet, loving, self-erasing generosity. That's not a comfortable thing to admit. But I think the honesty of it is important because it changes the story. It means I wasn't simply a victim of ungrateful people. I was a participant in something I helped create. And if I helped create it, I had the power to end it. That realization, sitting at my kitchen table at 4 a.m. with a spreadsheet and 31 years of reading people, that was the moment I got my power back. The actions we take compound, the same way money compounds. Every time Sylvia asked and I said yes without a conversation, without a boundary, the expectation grew a little larger, a little more solid until it became infrastructure. Until $3,200 a month was just part of how their household ran, the same as the electricity. People don't notice the electricity until it goes out. That's not cruelty. That's just what happens when a thing has been reliable long enough. When I canceled those 17 transfers, I was not punishing Sylvia. I was correcting a pattern I had allowed. The discomfort that followed, for her, for Todd, for all of us, was the natural consequence of a system returning to something more honest. A household that earns $119,000 a year can pay its own truck payment. They always could. They just hadn't needed to. What I want to hold on to from all of this, what I think is worth carrying forward, is that wisdom doesn't always arrive on time. It usually arrives late after something has already cost you. The intelligent thing, the truly intelligent thing, is to stop treating that lateness as a reason to keep paying. I learned something hard about myself in October, sitting in my car in a dark street with the streetlights coming on. I learned that I had confused love with self-erasure for a very long time. And I learned that it is never too late, not at 68, not ever, to put that down. Lily understood something at 15 that took me decades. She brought shortbread cookies and told me I'd done the right thing, and she was correct. Not because she was on my side, but because she was paying attention to what was actually true. That's the kind of person I want to be, still. At 68, in my cream-shuttered house in Naperville, with my tulip bulbs finally in the ground. Someone who, when she finally sees what's true, has the courage to act on it. Even when it's late. Even when it costs something. Especially then.